Hi everyone, I want to go ahead and do a follow-up to my last video, and I just want to apologize first of all for getting my numbers mixed up. I actually wasn't planning to mention this video, it just popped into my head all of a sudden, and so I'm really glad that it did, but I got it confused with 1:27 because I knew it was in Genesis 1:27 that God created Adam, but then it mentions it again in Genesis 2:7. So both times you have the number 27 connected with God forming Adam out of the dust of the earth. And as I mentioned before in my last video, I did a full video about the number 27. It was actually a two-part video on May 27th where I talked all about the number and how it's connected to the birth of Christ and the second coming of Christ. So this was really interesting information, and it all seems to connect. And it's interesting that he has it leading up to Shavuot, which I'm not sure what the current date would be, 271 days from Yom Teruah. I'm not sure how that works out. I don't remember what all was contained in this video, but I think he's been talking about June 21st, but I'll put the link in the description box. Okay, so I wanted to explain a few more things about this table. This was actually part 3 of the video. The other table that I had up was in part 2, but in this one I had put in the terms Satan and Iran deal. And what I was talking about originally in this video is how the matrix that came up, how it seemed to match up with Natan's testimony, because, well, I had mentioned the Fuller's Field because he had talked about how when he saw the resurrection and the saints came out of their graves, they were wearing beautiful garments. And another meaning of the word fuller is one who sews or makes garments, and he makes them full of pleats. And so he was talking about how when they came out they had on beautiful garments, so that was one of the things that matched up. But it also mentions a breach here, and he specifically used the word breach, or at least a rabbi did in the first video that I saw. He said that before the war begins there was going to be some type of an event, and then the rabbi said, "You mean a security breach?" And he said, "Yeah, exactly, there's going to be some type of security breach, and then there was going to be an all-out war." So this is talking about a war beginning with a confederacy going against Israel and with the king of Syria. And so I just want to show you something interesting that I just came across earlier this morning. For some reason I was led to Psalm 68. I think I was led to it yesterday, and I pulled it up again. And it's interesting how Psalm 68 is actually the psalm that reads like 1967. If you look at Psalm 67, it really doesn't say much. I'll just show it to you real quick. I'm not going to read it, but as you can see, it doesn't say much at all. But then when you go to Psalm 68 is where it actually reads like the 6-day war, and it talks about the hill of Bashan. It says, "The hill of God is as the hill of Bashan, a high hill as the hill of Bashan." And I'm going to read the rest of that in a minute, but I just want to show you where Bashan is. It's basically where you had the Golan Heights. Over here it says Bashan, Carmel, and Lebanon are all near Damascus in southern Syria, and are also near the Golan Heights, northern Israel. I suspect that this is the area that will be affected by the Turkish-led destruction of Damascus, Isaiah 17, Jeremiah 49, 23 through 27, and the following Turkish-led invasion into northern Israel that is described in Ezekiel 38. And of course, that's what Natan saw in his vision. He saw the Gog-Magog war. So I thought it was interesting because you have Bashan is where the Golan Heights were located. And if you look at the word Bashan, it says Bashan is a biblical place first mentioned in Numbers 21:33, where Og, which sounds a lot like Gog, the king of Bashan, which is basically Syria, it comprised the area which now makes up Syria, came out against the Israelites at the time of their entrance into the promised land, is what it goes on to say. Okay, so if you look at this image, you can see where it says here Bashan translates to modern day Syria and the Golan Heights, so it's equivalent to the Golan Heights today. This was the ancient map with Bashan, and then this is a current map with the Golan Heights. Okay, and so the Golan Heights were taken over by Israel in the Six-Day War, so this entire psalm reads like 1967, but for some reason it's in Psalm 68, so it's as if God doesn't fully recognize it until the year 8, until 1968. And so that seems to be the pattern. That is the point that I wanted to make, and I just want to show you how there's a pattern between 17 and 18, or year 7 going through to year 8. But okay, I was going to read the whole chapter, but it's too long. But if you look at the pattern just in this psalm, you can see that there seems to be a pattern with the numbers 7 and 8. It talks about, in verse 7, it says, O God, when thou wentest forth before thy people, when thou didst march through the wilderness, Selah. And then in verse 8 is where it says the earth shook, the heavens also dropped at the presence of God, even Sinai itself was moved at the presence of God, the God of Israel. And so this is consistent with Exodus 19 verses 17 and 18, and Exodus 20 verse 18, which I've talked about before, where it talks about Mount Sinai and how the whole mountain was a smoke and how God descended upon the mountain. It seems to come up in verse 18, or starting from verse 17 to 18, and then again you see the same pattern over here. In verse 17 it says the chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of angels. The Lord is among them, as in Sinai in the holy place. Thou hast ascended on high, thou hast led captivity captive, thou hast received gifts for men, yea, for the rebellious also, that the Lord might dwell among them. Okay, and then it talks about Bashan over here in verse 22. It says, I will bring again from Bashan, I will bring my people again from the depths of the sea. So this seems to be prophetic of the restoration of Jerusalem in the end times, of New Jerusalem, but it also seems to be describing the Six-Day War in 1967 a lot more than Psalm 67, which really doesn't say anything about it. Okay, so the point that I wanted to make is that there seems to be a pattern with the numbers 17 and 18, because you have the destruction of Damascus mentioned in Isaiah 17. And so I wanted to look at Isaiah 18, which I believe the number represents the year 2018. And so if you look at Isaiah 18, it seems to mention the restoration here at the very last verse. It says, in that time shall the present be bought unto the Lord of the hosts, of the people scattered and peeled from a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden under foot, whose land the rivers have spoiled, to the place of the name of the Lord of hosts, the Mount Zion. Okay, so I pulled up a commentary on Isaiah 18:17 just to see what it said about it, to see if it's talking about the restoration. And I thought it was interesting because over here it's mentioning the word present, and it says this word is very rare and it only occurs again in Psalms 68 and 76. Okay, and you can see that here if you look at the word present. Strong's number 7862, you see that it comes up in just these 3 verses. So you have a connection here with Psalm 68 and then Isaiah 17, which are both connected with Bashan. And then this, I believe, is connected to Natan's vision, which again, that's what this entire table was about. That's what I was originally talking about, is how this matches up with Natan's vision. Okay, so if you look at the table over here, it says, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have purposed evil against thee, saying, Let us go up against Judah and vex it, and let us make a breach there for us, and set up a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabeel. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, it shall not stand. And I had mentioned how it has the word USA here, where it says, let us make a breach therein for us, and set up a king. So you have USA here, and then you have USSA right under it. Okay, so if you look at it in Isaiah 7, if you look at the text, you see that this comes up in Isaiah 7:5 is where this begins. It says, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, let us go up against Judah and vex it, and let us make a breach therein for us, and set up a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabeel. So this is coming up in Isaiah 7:5 and Isaiah 7:6. And if you look at Natan's testimony, the rabbi had asked him, when does the war begin? And he said, it's actually already started. And he said, when did it start? And he said, on the 27th of Elul, which was September 11 in 2015. But then he goes on to say that was the 27th of Elul last year in 5775, because that was 3 days before the Feast of Trumpets, which would be when the new year begins, which would have been 5776. So this was right at the turning of the year from 5775 to 5776. And this is when Natan said the war began. And so you have that mentioned over here where it says, let us, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have taken evil counsel against thee, saying, let us go up against Judah and vex it, and let us make a breach therein for us, and set up a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabeel. So this is where they devise an evil plan. And I had mentioned here in the ASV version, which is the version that this Bible code uses, it says they have purposed evil. So when you run those two words together, it makes the word devil, and then you had the word Satan coming up here in ELS form right next to that. Okay, this is also where you had the words Syria and Ephraim coming up right next to it. And I can't really see it right now, but in the original video, I believe it was probably in yellow, which is very faint, but it was sharing the N in Satan, the word Iran. You can see the R right here. I believe the I is over here. So it had Iran coming up in ELS form, sharing the N in Satan. You also had Syria going through that, was sharing the R in Syria. And then you also had ISIS going through that, which is not showing up in here, but it's in the original video I showed where it had ISIS going through that as well, which was also mentioned in Natan's testimony. Okay, so you have the evil counsel taking place here in verses 5 and 6, and then it goes on to say, thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass, for the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, and within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it not be a people. And so it's talking about breaking Ephraim, which a lot of people believe represents the U.S., but in any case it represents the Gentiles, and you see that coming up in verse 8. And then of course this is Hebrew year 778, and it was in year 775 that Natan said the war began, and you see evil counsel taking place here. And you also had the words Iran deal coming up in the table. And another important thing that was coming up is the 2 smoking firebrands, which God is saying not be faint because of the 2 smoking firebrands. You can see that right here. And Natan had said in his testimony that the Messiah was going to stop 2 missiles from hitting Israel. So you had all these facts that were matching up with Natan's testimony. Okay, so I have a lot more I want to share. I want to talk a little bit more about the holy seed and the stalk of the tree that is felled, and how that's what's being described in this Simpsons video, and how that's how God's going to fix everything, but I'll have to do that in the next video. Thanks for